Welcome to the ultimate guide on mastering AI collaboration with the rule of 100. Learn how to gain 100 minutes of productivity from just 1 minute of AI collaboration. In today's video, we'll introduce you to the rule of 100, a powerful technique that teaches you the skills and mindset needed to collaborate effectively with AI. This method helps you move from using AI as a simple tool to working with it as a complex collaborator. Daniel is an expert in AI. He has spent years perfecting this technique to help individuals and professionals enhance their productivity and impact. Ever wondered how to get the most out of your AI tools? Stay tuned.
Well, what do I mean when I say master your collaboration with artificial intelligence? And to me, this is about gaining the skills and the mindset shifts that you need to get more impact out of where you choose to invest your time. So a lot of the content that's out there about working with GPTs and generative AI and things like that is very focused on doing a specific thing for your job or completing a specific task. And I'm very much focused on trying to impart some of what I've learned about how to collaborate with AI, mostly so you can get more out of what you choose to spend your time on. So really fast, a little bit about me. I am very passionate about enabling and empowering individuals through that mastery of AI collaboration. And I've spent a lot of time in artificial intelligence, a lot of time in programming, design thinking, and machine learning. I teach at a couple of universities. Also, I'm very focused on digital transformation, particularly in the context of GTM. And I'm an entrepreneur. So that's a bit about me and my background. But to keep us going, because we got a lot of material to cover. So to get into it today, this is what we're going to cover. We're just going to briefly talk about what's the rule of 100. Then we're going to talk about what are those skills that you need. Then briefly, what are those mindset shifts? Then we're just going to take, there's 5 levels of the mastery. We're just going to take the first one and we're going to go through the key concepts of that. And then we're going to do a quick demonstration so you can see it. And then my hope is to also share these slides and the materials with you so that you can repeat this for yourself. So that's what we're going to cover. And my goal is that you come away from this being able to repeat the process and use it for yourself. So what is the rule of 100? There's 5 levels of mastery that I would argue. And we're just going to cover the first one today, which is about essentially achieving this threshold of, can you get to a point where you can consistently spend a minute with generative AI? Choose your tool. We're probably going to use Claude today because ChatGPT is down. Could you spend a minute and get 100 minutes of impact back? And if you can get to a point where you can consistently get that 100 minutes back, you've hit that first level. And to do that, you have to learn how to think about working with AI as a collaborator that you're communicating with, instead of a point and click tool or a piece of technology that you apply to a specific thing. So we're gonna work through that today. But as you master that, then you start looking for new ways to get more impact out of your time and redesigning your workflows, building up more capabilities in your toolbox, and getting to a point where your AI collaborator really is a teammate so that you can do so much more. So how do you get 100 minutes out? How do you get to a point where you could actually get that? And there are 3 skills that I'm going to touch on here to try to get there, and then we're going to demonstrate it once we get through the skills and the mindset shifts. And the first is what I call the interview process. And you're going to see this today, but so often when you sit down to work with AI, you are asking the AI to just do a thing for you, saying, write this email or summarize this thing or help me make an ad or whatever. And one of the things that I've learned is that if you flip it around and you supply all the information and the context and the detail, and you treat it like an interview process where it's either interviewing you or it's interviewing that information, whatever that information is, it can be a book, it can be a website, it can be a collection of curated information. But if you treat it like an interview where it's extracting the information out for you and you're using that information for something that you need, then it gives you so much more control over what is the information that's being used and how is that information coming back and being used in your workflow. So this first skill is about mastering that interview process with your collaborator so that you can get so much more control over the information and the response and the structure of that. So we're going to see that when we do the demo. But the second thing that I want to convey is the idea of a scaffold. And oftentimes when you sit down to work with your AI and you say, do this thing for me, you just get a response back. And if you were to ask it to do it again, you're going to get a different response. And you do it a few times, and every time it looks slightly different. One of the ways that you can really get more consistency and more control over what comes back is by defining what I'm referring to as the scaffold, or you might think of it as a template. So when you say, do this thing for me, you have given it the bare bones or the framework or the scaffold that it needs to take this information and put it together for you. I think about it a little bit as the interview is extracting information and the scaffold is pouring that information into a template that you can use to do a thing. And so as you master the ability to put one of these scaffolds together, which we're going to see in the demo, you can move so much faster at taking that information and structuring it into what you want. So, and it gives you a lot more control over what comes back, as well as the ability to think of it. I think about it a little bit like a Lego brick, where you're putting these bricks of information together. So if you've got your interview and you're extracting information out, and you've got your scaffold that you're pouring it into to start to build these bricks that you could do something with, what does that do for you? The last thing that I would say as far as skills go is it's not just about time savings or efficiency. It's also about personal impact. And personal impact comes down to what you find to be impactful. I can't necessarily tell you that. And so as you're thinking about how do I go get personal impact, it can come through where you choose to spend your time, how you structure your workflows, what you're doing instead of that, but also, what does good look like to you? When you're completing a task, and we're going to use the job hunt and the resume creation process as the example, but when you're seeking a new job or preparing yourself for a new role, that's very personal. And what matters to you and where you work and why you do it is unique to you. And so having the ability to coach your AI essentially, or provide the right information to your AI collaborator to be able to dial that in for you, is a huge part of the skills you need to get a good result. So those skills, the ability to extract the information through an interview, scaffold it, and kind of fill it out, and then tailor it for what matters to you, are kind of the 3 key skills. And then I've got 3 key mindset shifts, and then we're going to do it. So the first mindset shift that I would convey is, don't think of it as a command. Don't go there and be like, do this thing. Think about it as a communication. And one of the reasons why I would say this is, like, let's say this was a human collaborator and you walked into the room and you said, do this thing for me. How well does it go if you just say, do this thing for me? But if you say, I've got this goal, I need to do this thing, here's the background information, here's why I need to do it, and then you go do it, the collaboration is going to be a lot cleaner and a lot more effective. So it's the same in the context of AI. AI doesn't have any of the background information or understanding of what you're asking for, and you can't just show up and ask it to do a thing. So if you start shifting away from thinking of it as commanding to thinking of it as a conversation that's iterative and recursive, and it's growing over time as you're doing the thing, which you're going to see in this demo, you get a very different mindset as you're collaborating with it, and it makes it a lot more effective. So if that's the first skill, or the first mindset shift, the second then is from tool to partner. And I think one of the things that I have learned along the way of this is, if you pull up your AI tool, whatever that might be, let's say it's Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever it is, and you're thinking of it as technology or tool, and you're saying, create this thing for me, that is a very point and click, one-off thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can get huge amounts of value out of that. But if you, over time, can get it to a point where you've saved, through a GPT or a workbook or a project in Claude, or these different mechanisms of saving off the process that you're using, and if you've saved it as a process that you can repeat, you can start to rely on it more like a partner. So, for example, in the job hunt that we're about to do, you could have a tool that writes a resume for you, or you could have a tool that writes a cover letter for you, or you could configure this and think of this in a way that next time I want to go get a job, or next time a recruiter calls me, or next time this thing pops on my radar, I'll just throw all the information at my partner and it will do all the things I needed to do. And so that's what we're going to demonstrate here shortly. So thinking about it instead of a one-off thing, and instead thinking of it as a repeatable partner that you can come back to over and over, it gives you the ability to do so much more and to do it so much faster. And so the last one, and then we're going to get out of theory, is getting from efficiency to transformation. And I think one of the big mindset shifts here, a lot of what you read about AI and a lot of what is exciting in the world of AI is about efficiency. It's like cost savings or time savings or something like that. And that's not wrong. You can get a lot of cost savings and time savings. But I think what's more important is the impact that it can have on how you choose to spend your time, how you actually do your work and where you do your work, and the ability of putting that time back in your day to go do something else. So whether it's the 100-minute analogy, sometimes I'm using of putting 100 minutes back in your day, or it's allowing you to focus on aspects of your work that you care more about. The point of this mindset shift is don't just think about AI and AI collaboration as a time saver or a moneymaker. Also think about it in terms of, okay, now that I know how to collaborate with AI, how can I get more meaningful use of my time or more meaningful impact out of my time? So those are the three tools and three mindset shifts that we're going to hit, and we're going to run a demo. But and this is kind of what I just said, but saying it more succinctly, it's really critical to get the most out of working and collaborating with AI, to stop thinking about it as just replacing what you're doing. Instead of saying, oh, I'm going to use it to write a resume, instead think about it as, in the world of AI and in the context of having this collaborator, what is now possible that wasn't possible before? So taking the resume as an example, maybe you would tailor your resume for a job, for this job, or tailor it for that job, and you apply to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 jobs, and you're tailoring the resume, and it takes you 30 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, to tailor the resume. Well, you couldn't do that for 100 jobs or 1,000 jobs because it would take you forever. But in the world of AI, you can. And so it's not necessarily that you should do 1,000 jobs. It's that was just not possible before. So as you're thinking about, or at least it wasn't realistically possible before. So as you're thinking about collaborating with AI, don't think about it only in terms of replacing something you already do. Take a step back and think, oh, okay, if I can go so much faster and do all of these things, what could I do instead? Or what could I do that's better? And rethink those limits. So to take it out of the abstract and actually do a demonstration of this, we're going to use the job hunt process, and I have some stuff prepared for doing that. But we're going to talk about, okay, let's show this interview process, let's build that scaffold, and let's shift from command to communicate. So I was going to use ChatGPT, and let me just see if it's up right now. It wasn't working for me. Yeah, it's still not working for me, so I'm going to use Claude. So in this case, so we start out by saying the first skill is learning how to interview. And I actually think if you're starting something you've not done before, you can interview yourself. So you might come to your AI collaborator and say, help me come up with questions I can use to interview myself, to explore what matters to me in the job hunt. So this first step of coming up with some questions to do a thing, it could even be as simple as interviewing yourself. But beyond interviewing yourself, you could interview material. So this first step of like, what are these questions and what should I be thinking about when I'm thinking about a job hunt? You should take it as an iterative and recursive thing where you're thinking, okay, what matters to me and why does it matter to me? And I'm not going to play this one all the way out because we don't have a lot of time. So I made a fake person up, and our fake person is, I think I named her Sarah. And Sarah asked these questions of herself, what matters to me in my job and what skills are relevant to me and so on, and just answer these questions for yourself. So starting out by asking yourself, hey, and we're using the job hunt as an example, but you could take anything. You could say starting a business, you could say doing your taxes, you could say writing a lease, you could say articulating your goals, whatever that thing is. You start out by saying, hey, help me come up with what matters to me in that context, and you have that lens that matters to me. And now I have that lens. So let's take this, for example. We're going to come back to our collaborator. Here is my perspective. I'm just going to give the perspective back. You would have done this for yourself in this context. Okay, so now the bot has some context about me, and two reasons why this matters. One, it's helping me see the conversation. Two, it's giving the bot perspective about me and what matters. So I've just given it all this background information about me. So if I'm trying to go from this idea of an interview and using it to extract information out, and now I want to think about a scaffold, let's come back to the bot and say, okay, in this context, help me come up with the steps to support an effective job hunt. So now we're asking the bot to start thinking about or start telling me what are the steps I might approach to do this. And so you might be saying, hey, how do you know this is good? Or how do I know it's not hallucinating? And what about all this other context? And so as we briefly hit earlier in the presentation, we talked about how can you provide context and detail and really shape this in the right direction. So it's come back and said, hey, you should be thinking about all these things in the context of your job hunt. But maybe I want to go out to the world and find something that I trust, that I can take their word for it, if you will. So you might go out to Google and say, and Google around and find, this is from Harvard, for example, 5 tips for changing careers, or how to jumpstart your job search, or job hunting strategies. So you might go out and find some information from a place that you trust. So let's say we trust Indeed as a good place. So if you come over here, this is what I mean about being able to process a lot more information and say, take into context this information and provide a second iteration. You can give it the information that you trust from a source that you trust to help it kind of refine these steps. So this is just one, but back to what's possible versus what wasn't possible. You don't have to stop with just one. You can give it an entire book. You could give it a podcast. You could give it an interview. You could give it a million different articles if you wanted to. So we gave this one from Indeed. Let's grab a couple more, assuming that you did some homework and you found some sources that you trust, and we're just going to use these for now. Here is another. And let's give it one more as well to show how we're kind of pouring through different types of materials that we might would trust to help us come up with how to approach this. So please take this additional information and try again. And so the point here is that by taking information you trust and feeding it to it and building out this initial approach, you are able to control how it's thinking about it and how it's providing the recommendations back, and you're using information that you trust. So now I have this initial kind of broad scaffold, if you will, of what a job hunt looks like, but you can't just sit here and say, AI Collaborator, go do my job hunt. You have to break it into chunks. And so one of those chunks might be a resume. So assume that you had gone through it. We're all familiar with the job hunt. That's why I picked job hunt. And one of the steps is having a resume. So you could say, in the context of a resume, what are the steps for me to create one? And ask it. So in this case, we've taken a broader scaffold, broken it down into a smaller step, and we say, okay, here's how we're thinking about what a resume is. But let's not stop there. Let's go out and say, let's find an example of what a good resume might look like. So Wall Street Journal, 18 resume writing tips, and let's come back over and back to our collaborator. Please review this material and create a new iteration. So what you're seeing here is the process of coming back and having this conversation and giving it information and controlling how it's thinking about it, breaking into some steps and giving it more context. So you could do this in anything, right? You could take any knowledge workflow that you need to do. It could be writing an ad campaign. It could be coming up with your goals. It could be your business strategy. It could be whatever you want it to be, but still starting with what matters to me? Why does it matter to me? And then feeding it some information and have it come up with these different steps. So let's say I now have this step for how to think about a resume. Well, turning that into a scaffold, use this information and generate a template for a resume that I could use for my job hunt. So now we're taking all this background information and asking the bot to turn it into something that I can fill out. Something I kind of glazed over because we don't have a lot of time is, as you're doing this, you would be thinking about, do I agree with this? Does this template look like something I would actually want? Whatever the case. So then back to our earlier part where we started out by saying what matters to me, please review this and take into consideration what I told you matters to me at the start of our conversation. And try again. This process of iterating and providing information is what I mean about having a conversation over time. So it's coming back and it's saying, oh, hey, I didn't think about that. Let me put it into context. So obviously we're moving quickly through this to try to demonstrate it. But now I've got a general understanding of the task, which is a job hunt. I took a piece of it, the resume, and I gave it more context from places I trusted, as well as my background information. And it's starting to come up with a resume. So coming back over to here, we went down this path of interviewing ourselves, extracting some information, but then also taking other information and throwing it in there, coming up with a scaffold for the broader task, breaking it into chunks, one of those being a resume, and communicating with it back and forth to start going through that process. So if you were trying to apply this to other aspects of your work, and I know we're out of time here, but if you're trying to think about this at other aspects of your work, the thing you're trying to answer when you're approaching this with your collaborator is, are there ways that I could streamline my work, i.e. minimize the mental bandwidth? So yes, we all know what a resume is, but when's the last time you sat down and thought about what's the best practice for a resume, right? And how much time would you put into that? Well, if you could just feed it the information and let it help you do that, you can really reduce the bandwidth required to do that. Well, what about enhance and enrich? Well, if I could give it lots of context and I would have read all that information or the books or whatever, I can get a much more thorough look at what is best practice for the thing as it's coming back and trying to help me with that. And then as far as acceleration goes, the thing we aren't going to get to here is now you find a job and you want to apply to it. Well, you just come back, throw that job description into it and say, write my resume in the context of this job description, and bam, you just got your resume written in the context of the job description. That would have taken you a lot of time to do that. And maybe you could have done that for one, but what about 5 or 10 or 20? And would the 20th one been as good as the first one if you were sitting there doing it all day long? So that's what you're trying to answer. So this idea of personal impact. Hey, if I can go explore all this information and get a better result and speed up that time, and if I can, instead of thinking of, oh, I'm just going to have it write my resume, think, what is possible today? Oh, I can now have 20 tailored resumes that takes everything into context and does it all right now so that every single time I have my best foot forward. That's different. And that 100x potential is about not just going 10 times faster, but having a 10 times better result. And what does that mean in the context of your job hunt? And just kind of breaking it down to think through that using the information that you're providing to guide it. So I would say as you're exiting from this and you're thinking back on this, I would encourage you to think about, hey, what's possible if you could save all that time, and how would you reuse it? If you didn't have to worry about refactoring your resume every time, what would you use that time on? Would you use it to read more about the company, or read more about the market, or build a new skill, or whatever it might be? And approach this with a growth mindset. Be comfortable rethinking some of your workflows and processes as you're doing what you're doing.
By mastering the rule of 100 and adopting these skills and mindset shifts, you can revolutionize your AI collaboration. Remember, the goal is not just to work faster, but to achieve better, more impactful results. Join us on this journey to unlock the full potential of AI collaboration. Subscribe for more tips, join our community, visit our website.